The U.S. has conducted a ninth straight night of airstrikes on Iran.
Yeah, the raids came after the Pentagon announced the death of a third American service member just this weekend. The U.S. military says it hit missile launch sites in the northwestern part of Iran, along with command centers and air defense bases. Now, Iran responded with more strikes on U.S. targets in neighboring countries. And the Pentagon says at least 2 service members were killed by an Iranian attack on Jordan. A 25-year-old man and a 19-year-old woman. A third died during the controlled detonation of an Iranian drone downed in Iraq.
We feel very badly, but you know, those great people, those great patriots were out there fighting that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Well, the U.S. and Iran have inched closer to an all-out war since last month's ceasefire collapsed. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio is saying the U.S. is still open to diplomacy.
Joining us now is UCLA political science professor Benjamin Radd to discuss some of these points. So let's dive in here. At least 3 U.S. service members were killed over the weekend. That's the big headline this morning. President Trump telling reporters the U.S.'s strikes were in honor of those soldiers. Iran has responded now with more strikes on U.S. targets in neighboring countries. So how far do you see this escalating or expanding here?
Good morning. Here's where the recent strikes have taken us now. From the U.S. side, they're hitting things like power plants, desalinization. Well, I should say, excuse me, the Iranians are now targeting power desalinization plants in neighboring Gulf states. These are states that harbor, that have U.S. bases, U.S. forces in them. And so we're seeing Iran really lash out and go after these Arab states in an attempt to basically put pressure on them to, in turn, pressure the United States to wrap up its military operation. From the American perspective, there's really nothing else that could be done while Iran is threatening vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. And so there's really no off-ramp visible right now. There is no space for diplomacy because even if we, let's say, fighting were to stop for the moment, it takes us back to where we were about 10 days ago, which is, again, Iran's control of the Strait, attacking ships in what the United States sees as a violation of the terms of the now defunct MOU.
Absolutely. Well, 4 Iranian attacks now in 5 days have targeted U.S. forces in Jordan, and dozens have been left injured. Should we be concerned about U.S. missile defense systems failing to intercept those?
That's a good question. And the concern could be the failure of those systems, but also the fact that Iran still has these capabilities. We've heard President Trump now, day after day, go on camera and say how Iran's defense systems have been devastated, their Navy's been devastated, their capabilities have been reduced by 90% is the number he throws around. And yet the Islamic Republic still manages to launch these missiles and launch these drones to devastating effect. And I think the greater concern is not necessarily the interceptors, which, by the way, the U.S. is going to begin to deplete its remaining stockpile. That's a point of concern. But more importantly, how is Iran able to get these systems into launch-ready configuration? Why is the U.S. not able to locate and destroy where these stockpiles are? That's a bigger question also.
Well, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said last night the U.S. remains open to talks, and an Iranian official said their side was similarly open to discussions. But we've been down this road several times before now at this point. What is a realistic path forward in your mind?
The realistic path forward is for, I think at this point, the United States looking to continue the intensity of the barrage of attacks on Iran, to weaken its ability to target ships in the Strait of Hormuz. In other words, go back to diplomacy negotiations only when Iran is less capable or incapable of having any influence over the Strait while those negotiations are taking place. Because if we can't accomplish that from the U.S. perspective, then essentially it gives Iran the disproportionate leverage going into those talks, which brings us back to where we were.
Absolutely. You mentioned control over the Strait of Hormuz, which of course is central here. But with the death of these U.S. service members this weekend, especially 3 in one weekend, does this change, you think, support for this war or how people will side with President Trump moving forward with it?
That's what the Islamic Republic is banking on. From their perspective, that the United States is traditionally weary, or the public is, of any casualties, especially in, let's say, unpopular conflicts like this one. And so the idea being that if the U.S. does suffer casualties, that it increases the domestic pressure, in addition to the foreign pressure that's being put on the United States by its Gulf allies to compel President Trump to change course here. But again, anything at this point, if the president were to stop, it puts the United States in a weaker position than it was before the war started. That is a position that is untenable for this president.
Yeah, that is really tough.
Yeah, it is. All right, Benjamin Radd, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We appreciate it.